Welcome to Hemmings Road to Improvement, our new road trip series where we take an old school vehicle and, with the help of some of the biggest names in the SEMA universe, update it over a 3,500-mile cross-country journey to benefit the children that SEMA Cares seeks to help on a daily basis.
Hello and welcome to another Hemmings Road to Improvement Extra. This is where we go and break down the most recent episode of Road to Improvement, which means I am joined as usual by Road to Improvement host and prime driver of the 1981 Chevy Suburban, Mike Musto. How's it going, Mike?
How are you? Good, dude. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm in the northern Michigan outpost of Hemmings. This is my parents' place, so we get the fancy background. So as always, everyone, if you're watching this and you haven't watched Road to Improvement episode 7, please do. We'll put a link up there or over there. I don't know which one. But jumping right into it, I like this episode a lot. And one of the things I liked was Ilana goes on an explanation about when you're working on a project, how many times you go to the parts store. And it's another one of those ones where it's like, this is exactly what Ilana's like in person. It's super true. It's just one of those things. But I also loved it because at this point in the trip, either because it's like you spent so much time putting the heads on the car, or because it's just this far into the trip, all of the, for lack of a better term, all the shine is off. Like, this is just you and Ilana like being yourselves. There isn't any like, okay, well, we're on camera, we're going to be the camera version. It's right. So tell me about am I seeing that right? Or
Yeah, I think there's a point in every production where, especially if it's a long production, where you just kind of acquiesce to what's around you because I don't want to say you're beaten up, but you can't put on airs for anyone anymore. You're like, this is where we are. This is what's happening. I hope you like it. And if you don't, there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah. So as a spoiler for, hopefully it's not a spoiler because you've seen it, but when you're going to the parts store over and over, and just like it's almost, the show hasn't lent itself to that sort of like testimonial shot of like, I'm at the parts store again and I forgot a thing. And I just got a huge kick out of it because I feel like if we've all lived that, where you're working on a project and you guys had to push through. There's always that question of like, do I stop here and just wait until the store's open, or do I call 8 stores and find the part that I want right now?
Yeah. Well, it was funny because we had it, and like we went to the parts store probably 9 times, and there was one shot that we didn't put in just because we had to get it fast, where I actually had to drive like 2 hours to get a certain part that we needed because that was the only way to get it. And it's like, but that's what you have to do. It's just, and anybody who says that that's not a fact of building, or when you're doing like heads into cam, you are always going to be running to the parts store. So Atlanta is 1000% right. Find your 1, 2, and 3 backup store, and then you could start. You know what I mean?
And the other thing is, people wonder like, oh, this shop, I had this work done on a shop and they said it would be 2 days and it took them 3 weeks. And it was like, yeah, they were waiting on like an oil drain plug that, had to get shipped from a warehouse and was backed up.
Yeah. Well, one of the other parts was that, and then people really need to focus on is that all the parts that we took off, so many parts we just couldn't reuse, like the manifolds and, the water pump housing and stuff like that. They were just so old and so crusty because they're 40 years old. You can't reuse them,
Yeah. So this is jumping ahead, but I was going to ask you that. So you put new exhaust headers on it basically, right? Because the old ones they had to drill out.
Yeah, we took the manifolds off, the stock manifolds, and they were original, which means 40 years of use. So like the manifold studs were so rusty, you couldn't, it just wasn't worth it for the amount of time that it would have taken to drill them out and put new studs in. Like, just go buy new Chevy manifolds. Like, it's a 350, they're every 2 feet. So that's what we did. And like parts like that, because you don't want to put old crusty stuff back on brand new stuff, because that doesn't make sense, right? Like, you can reuse some of this stuff, but if you're going to do this, like, do it right and get the new parts and build it correctly.
Yeah. Well, and even from a functional standpoint, it's like you with something like exhaust, you want it to fit flush and you want to have a good bite on the bolt, and you don't want it to snap off when you start tightening it down. And then
that's right.
Just do it the first time. So we've jumped way ahead. In this episode, you put heads and a cam and a few other parts on the car. it's a great explanation, like a great how it's made, and a great explanation of heads. But what were the specific things that were the criteria for choosing the heads you got? Like, what do you need to know, I guess, when you're shopping for a head, and how did that play out in the Suburban?
So it was interesting. We had spoke to Tim Torikarian from AFR, from Airflow Research, and he was great. So we were at the Airflow manufacturing facility, and like I had no idea what goes into actually manufacturing a head. And so when we were down there, it was so cool that we were like, this is great. Like you said, you mentioned how it's made. Like, let's do a mild how it's made on how heads are constructed. I thought it was super interesting. And as a layman to that, I felt like everybody else should kind of know. But then in talking to Tim about the heads for the Suburban, he was like, what do you want to do with the truck? Right? This is not some high horsepower thing. So we had talked to him about speccing out a set of heads that were great for kind of low end torque, but that were really free revving and that breathed a little better. And he had spoken to the guys at Competition Cams, and we had kind of matched the cam to the heads. And what we wound up with was a really nice system that gives us low end torque, but it'll rev to 5,500 RPM. And it's a really nice combo, and it worked out very well for the Suburban.
Right. Well, and that's the thing to consider too, because we went through this with some of the other upgrades, like EFI. You just put it on, and the computer figures everything out. Heads in a cam, you have to match them to the engine. You have to match them to your use, like you said. Like you can spend a lot of money on heads and make your car run worse if you do it wrong.
Yeah, that's very true. That's correct. That's correct.
So you mentioned a couple things. It's more efficient. Did you get another horsepower or another fuel economy boost out of this?
Yeah, I think with everything we probably got to around, I think the best mileage I saw was 16 miles to the gallon on that thing, which when you consider that we were doing in the beginning like 9, 10, that's pretty freaking good. You're talking about 75% increase, and that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's worth it.
Yeah. So Tim mentioned, on an engine like this, you might get 60 to 100 horsepower. What do you like ballpark? Either how much do you think you got, or how did it feel different with the heads on it?
So I mean, the ass dyno, when the truck was totally stock before we did any mods, it felt like it had about 100 and it felt like about 160 horsepower or so, right? That's just what the butt dyno kind of tells you. When we did the heads of the cam, I think we easily picked up 60 horsepower, because just the torque and probably, I want to say at least 80 pound-feet of torque, because that's what you really felt in the seat of your pants. You stepped on the gas and you were like, oh, this thing actually, it pulls now, where before it kind of got out of its own way, but not really. Now, like, it absolutely, you can merge with traffic and it's totally fine. The other thing was on the highway, like if you want to pass somebody at like 60, you can go from fifth to fourth, and you have that extra oomph to do so, right? You're not going to go out and win races, but there's more power throughout the entire rev range of the engine right now, which is great.
Yeah, so you don't have to plan ahead when you want to do a passing maneuver,
right?
Or just never pass. So cost, like this is probably the most complicated thing you did. There was a lot of shop time involved, which again, if you're doing it at home, you're getting into a little more advanced technique and some more advanced tools. But just parts cost. How much were the heads in the cam and the accessories, like the timing chain and the push rods?
I think you're talking at a minimum of 30. Yeah, about $3,000.
Okay.
Yeah, $3,200.
Which is kind of a theme. There. Everything we've done is right in the $3,000 to $4,000.
It is. It is. And I think what people need to understand is it's not just teardown. Like if you watch the video in the beginning, you could see how long it took, how much teardown there was, because we basically took everything that we had already done completely off the engine, right? But it was the prep time that was really the killer, right? Because if you have an older vehicle that hasn't been apart before, every surface has to be cleaned and prepped to accept the new heads, right? So you're razor blading every single surface to get any type of old sealant off or old gaskets off. And then anytime you go into a motor, I mean, you're going to upgrade stuff, right? You're going to upgrade, like Tim said, you're going to do the timing chain, and then you're going to probably do the water pump because that's off. And then who knows what else you're going to do, right? So it does kind of snowball. So I'm going to say, if you're going to do a heads and cam install with the extra parts that you're going to need, I'd budget around $5,000. I think that's totally reasonable. So
yeah, I mean, you end up buying, like you said, all that extra stuff. One other thing I noticed in the video, you guys are pouring in oil once you're ready to go, and you mentioned the zinc additive. So this is, do you have to run a break-in cycle of, however many minutes or hours or miles when you put a new, the new camshaft and all the new valve train in?
Yeah. So the break-in cycle for the cam, it was varying your rev range, up to about 2,500 RPM. And that was about 20 minutes, just up and down and up and down and up and down. And then you have break-in oil for the cam. And so that's about 500 miles, right? So, and we did it, we followed the exact instructions that Tim had set for us, and it's been fantastic. I mean, since then we've put easily another 2,000 miles on this thing, and it's been fantastic. It's been wonderful.
When you guys pick up the heads and all the parts from AFR, you cram them in the back of the Suburban. We've talked this whole time about, the Suburban does make everything that makes a Suburban good as a regular car makes it good for a photo shoot or a project because you can haul all your gear with you. But yep. I do have to ask, how full was the minivan? You had a production vehicle. Why was the Suburban carrying everything?
Because the minivan was full of all the camera gear. So you have to remember that everything that we took off the Suburban, for the most part, traveled with us, and we accumulated stuff on the road. So when we had first started and picked up the Suburban, we had parts that we had, one, bought from auto parts stores that we were taking with us. Two, we had parts that we had picked up along the way, and all the parts that we had taken off subsequently, for the most part, came with us, right? So it just turned into like a pack mule. And then the other part was, like, we would stop and we would buy souvenirs and throw them in the back of the Suburban, because in the Suburban, it was just myself and Alana, where the minivan was the crew, which contained 3 people. So many times the crew, all the camera gear was in the minivan, all the luggage, everything else was in the Suburban. So that's why.
All right. So I was going to ask you you're picking up souvenirs. Tell us some of your favorite souvenirs from the trip.
So what do we get? My favorite souvenirs, and everybody's gonna be like, really? I bought 3 race cans at Summit Racing in Texas because they simply do not sell them in the state of California. Like old school race cans with like the big nozzles on them with the rubber hose. You can't buy them in California because California goes, no, that's illegal. I don't know why, but apparently we can't get them here. So I bought 3 of them, and now I have my extra fuel cans, which is great.
Yeah, there's a shop in Michigan that I won't name just in case they get in trouble, but they're called fluid cans. But if you go into the shop, you're like, you guys have fluid cans? They're like, what? And they're like, like a gas can. Like, oh yeah, the gas cans are over there.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, that was my best souvenir.
One other piece on souvenirs. Then you've taken all these parts off the Suburban. It's for sale on Hemmings Auctions right now. Check out the listing in the description, or the link to the listing in the description. What part that came off the Suburban are you going to keep as a memento?
Probably nothing. I've got 6,000 miles in this truck, so I'm pretty good letting everything go. And honestly, a lot of the parts stayed at the manufacturers because we simply didn't have room for them. So, but yeah, I'm not keeping everything. Like I've had my time in the Suburban. I know every inch of it. It is now time to go to the next owner for them to enjoy. So,
all right. So with that, what's up in the next episode? We have one left or 2 to go.
There are 2 more episodes. The next episode that we're doing is we actually go to Classic Industries in Southern California, where the interior is treated to some nice upgrades. So that's going to be good. And this is making the Suburban a little nicer place to be in, which is cool.
All right. Well, thanks again, as always, Mike. Everyone, please check out the Suburban on Hemmings Auctions right now. Stay tuned for next week's episode. And always like, subscribe, send links to your friends, tell everyone about Road to Improvement. I love it. Mike loves it. We hope you do too. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Mike.